Ready? Good evening, everyone. Are we all ready? Group at the front here. Welcome to the Silicon Brighton People and Culture Club, which is run by Ali and I. Ali's over there if you don't know her. I'm Mo Cangelout, co-creator of Watch This Space, a diversity and inclusion company. And between us, we run the People and Culture Club. And the idea of this club is it's for people in people roles and interested in those kinds of topics in a lot of the tech companies that are in Silicon Brighton. So I'm going to attempt to do the intro for Silicon Brighton. So how many of you have heard of the Evolve conference? A few. Okay, it's happening in July, run by Silicon Brighton, and it's a day to bring together the tech community, ideas, and just that sense of community. It's at Brighton Dome with exhibition stands, speakers, and panels. You can buy tickets; they're on sale now. And if you're interested in exhibiting, you can definitely speak to Cameron about that. He'll be very happy to hear from you. And the QR code will take you to the website if you're interested. Silicon Brighton is a community that runs meetup groups on all sorts of subjects in the city. As you can see, there's lots of them on the screen there. There's a meetup for most things to do with tech, all kinds of things. You can find a meetup for it. So you can go to their website and find out more about it if you want to know more about a meetup that might be interesting for you. And these are all the Silicon Brighton supporters. So there's a whole range of companies there that support Silicon Brighton in all sorts of ways with sponsorship. And there's also a whole group of companies and people that support all the meetup groups too. The sponsors, thank you to James Chase, who are one of the main sponsors of Silicon Brighton. Plus Accounting, who many of you probably know, they're a sponsor as well of Silicon Brighton. And if you haven't already, join the Slack community that they have. There's loads of people in it. There's all different channels for different subjects. So if you go to the link tree, that will give you the information to join the Slack channel for Silicon Brighton. How did I do? Okay. I'm now going to hand you over to our speaker this evening, who is Demi Heath, who is the founder of Hearth Sustainability.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to do a quick tech switch over here. Here we go. Okay, so welcome everybody. It's nice to see all your faces. Thank you for sharing some pizza with me and some good conversation. So we're here today to talk about people and culture strategy in relation to B-Corp. So really having a think about what can you implement in your strategies to help your B Corp assessment, but also help your sustainable business practices. So who am I? A handful of you have met me before. I've been around on the Brighton Sustainable Business kind of networking area for about a year or so. Basically, I'm a B Corp nerd. I'm a big old B Corp nerd. I love B Corp. I'm currently wearing 4 different B Corp related hats. So lots to juggle, but very exciting. I'm actually from a creative background. So I studied photography and I've worked for museums, galleries, studios, and I lived over in some technical cabling in the background. Good. I lived over in New Zealand for 7 years throughout my 20s, and that had a major influence on kind of how I view business, how I view people, our connection to each other and our communities. When I was over there, I worked for the National Museum and I set up the Capital City Photography Festival. That photography festival only accepted work focused on environmental, social and economic issues. So my passion had already begun before I went down the B Corp path. But for many people, COVID hit and we all had a lot of free time on our hands. I had a chance to really reassess what I wanted to do in terms of aligning my personal values with what I was doing in my professional life. Working for the National Museum was fantastic, but I really wanted to explore sustainability in those 40 hours a week that we have. We spend most of our waking lives at work. So getting a chance to align those things together was really important to me. I started working for a B-Corp over there. I was embedded there. I took them through their recertification. They gave me a huge amount of support in terms of developing and training myself. Fast forward to now, that now means that I have 2 businesses on the go. So I'm the founder of Hearth Sustainability that offers one-on-one consulting for B-Corp certification. I also co-founded Sussex Impact Pathway, which takes groups of small businesses through certification together. I'm then embedded at PropellerNet, who are a leading B Corp in kind of Brighton and the Sussex region. We've just gone through recertification and got a lovely score of 99.4, which everyone was very happy about, if a little bit disappointed on missing the 100 mark. And then my final cap is that I'm a volunteer co-chair for Be Local Brighton, which launched in October. Soft launch in October. We had our hard launch during B Corp month, which was March. So I'm very embedded in the community, and I do this because, to me, B Corp is the most comprehensive way that we can practically move the business sector over to more sustainable practices. We cannot continue with the capitalist system that we have in place. It is all about growth. It is not about stability moving forward and finding the boundaries that the planet needs us to start recognizing. And B Corp for me does that across the board. So I want to understand from the people in the room, can we hear from the people online? Okay, that's good. Later. Okay, so very informal chat then. First of all, it would be great to understand kind of where you're at on your sustainable business journey. And then I want to ask you, kind of coming into this, are there specific areas or questions that you have for me? Because I have way too much content. There's way too much. So if there's anything you like to focus on, then we definitely can. So we'll do a quick hand raise. You can just about see the picture in the background, using the metaphor of going on a hike up a mountain aligned with your sustainable business journey. Who has just got out the car? You haven't started yet, but you're interested. Oh, interesting. Okay. Who's on the pathway? So you've started doing some bits and pieces. This is good. A lot more still to discover. Cool. Who's on the mountain? Like maybe you're B Corp certified already, like you are good to go. You're just here to kind of maybe understand a bit more about gold standard practice. Yeah, you are, Mo. I can agree with that. Who's on the top of the mountain? Who's leading? Yeah, that's a trick question. No one is. Apart from maybe Dr. Bronner's, they've decided to leave the B Corp community because the max score that you can get for B Corp is 200. They scored 206. So they've decided to leave the movement to really go and find out what platinum standard means, really. So is there anything in terms of people and culture strategy that you want to ask me or want me to focus on?
I'd quite like to know kind of what is absolutely non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And where the kind of edges are.
Yeah.
Because I work with small meetings.
Yeah.
Some of them follow the letter, and I just feel like there is, you know, there is best practice and there's working towards best practice and what that actually looks like, rather than we have to be best practice immediately. Otherwise we won't be.
Okay, great. Anything else?
I'd say, having gone through the whole process of it, I think it's interesting to think about what the work is that you need to do for a small company like ours. Quite a few people have asked about this. So, isn't it like months worth of work? And it's like, when you're a really small company, it's actually not.
Yeah.
Like when you're like trying to work remotely, it's probably a good time to actually do it and to start the journey. And it'd be interesting to discuss some of the things, the sort of aspects of the business, because I didn't know all of that.
Yeah. Okay, great, cool. I think we will be covering a lot of that. So I'm gonna attempt to keep it simple. Yes.
Is there a
So in terms of size of business, in terms of like how much revenue you have. Okay. Yeah. I can answer that very simply now. No, there is no necessary size. Actually, good news to share. I've taken Mo and Watch This Space on their B-Corp certification journey, and we are waiting an evaluation, taking my own business half through, and as of today, I've been assigned an evaluation analyst. I'm a one-man band. I'm a solo business owner, and I'm doing it. So the baseline is that you need to have been operating for a year and you need to be a registered limited company. So I could submit as a freelancer, but it would mean getting a lot of points would be a lot harder. And you can submit with less than a year of operations, but you're going for a pending B Corp certification whilst you're waiting for full certification. Cool. So, does everybody in the room understand what B Corp is? A little bit more guidance needed. So, B Corp certification is a sustainable business certification. There's things like ISOs or 1% for the planet, which focus on environmental impact only, or there's disability confidence or living wage certification, which only focuses on social impact, which are all great, by the way, and all can contribute to a B Corp certification. So it's a really robust way of looking at all ESG pillars, so all environmental, social, governance pillars that go in to make sustainable business practices. So because it's so comprehensive, it looks across 5 impact areas. So we look at workers, we look at governance, community, environment, and customers. So these are considered the 5 key stakeholder groups. And as I mentioned about moving away from the current capitalist model, we have that model because we put huge importance on the shareholder as the primary stakeholder in a business, constantly looking to keep them happy, constantly looking to make a business profitable, to put money towards stakeholders' pockets. What B Corp is trying to say, and the broader sustainable business movement, is that shareholders are not the only stakeholders. They're still important, and profit is still important, because without those things, we can't have a successful business that will run the test of time and is able to have positive impact on those other stakeholder groups. But it's just about bringing the level of importance back down to those other areas, because we are operating in the world. We need physical resources. Without workers, we don't have a business. Without coming to spaces like this and operating in the community, we don't have a business. So it's really about recognizing the importance of all those other groups as well. So alongside looking at stakeholder governance, looking at that evaluation aspect, it gives a huge amount of benefits. There's been a bunch of research done into sustainable business in general, not just B Corp. Sustainable businesses are more resilient. So more B Corps survived through the COVID pandemic without shutting down, without losing profit than was standard. There is enhanced brand recognition. So B Lab UK did a study in the middle of last year, putting B Corp brand, the B Corp logo recognition in the UK at 40%, which is incredibly high. It gives steady growth, because when you're looking at all of these things, you're able to strategize and think about the long term. So when you're thinking about a 10-year picture instead of what's happening next quarter, that gives stability, that gives resilience, and a good pathway to growth. And of course, there's a huge amount of consumer demand now for having businesses that actually give a shit, quite frankly. So this is why we do it, not only because it's important for the world and important for your business kind of longevity, but because it gives all of these great benefits as well. Why is it doing that? I'm going to touch very briefly on current standards versus new standards. So I recognize that there's cars on the screen for a sustainable business talk. Please bear with me. I'm going to try and make an analogy here. So we're having a switchover in the B-Corp community. So at the moment, everything that you're being assessed against is against a set of standards in a framework that B-Lab Global have come together over the period of 15 years to say, this is what we are assessing you against. These are the criteria. We're on version 6 right now. So if we have to think about like old model cars, like they were great. They connected us to the world. They were incredibly innovative for the time. They made us think very differently about how we connect with people, about landscapes. It brought people together from long distances. And over that time, there might have been some adjustments to the car, like we got seat belts, we got power steering. We're really kind of playing around with like the small aspects of what the car makes up. Fast forward to today, we've got electric cars. Still a car, but fundamentally what the car is doing is very different. It's not burning fossil fuels, it's running on electric. All of the systems inside are electric. There's not a huge amount of mechanical stuff in there anymore. So I would compare the versions 1 through 6 of the standards to that kind of original bunch of car models. Very innovative. There was some messing around in there to like try and improve them. What's going to be changing this year is we're moving on to version 7. We're moving on to the electric car. So the standards are having quite a big change in terms of what they fundamentally look at. So the current standards is based on a point system. So you need at least 80 points to certify. The average business who's not looking at this stuff at all will get about 50 just from filling it out. And as I said, the max you can get is 200. Under the new standards, there's no points. So they're really trying to move away from box ticking exercises. And also you could get those points from anywhere in the assessment. So you could be doing really well in looking after your workers and looking after the environment, but have no transparency in your governance structures and not be looking after your community, and you could still certify. So there's no baseline of what the expectations are. What the new standards say is there's mandatory requirements across all of the impact areas that we're putting in front of you. So for example, in the environment section, you would have to have a carbon report, or you would have to have a policy on human rights, just as 2 kind of small examples there. The new standards haven't been released yet. B-Lab keep pushing the deadline back and back and back. They were meant to be finalized and released 8 days ago. But they've been on this journey for about 4 years, and I know they want to get it right. So I was going to kind of take you through what these new standards look like, but actually, because they're not coming in for new B Corps until next year, these are only really relevant upcoming for recertifying B Corps this year. Yeah.
Why was the point system put to one side?
Because it doesn't speak to the fact that some things are just a given as mandatory now. They didn't see the points as being necessary, so they're switching to a kind of meets expectation, exceeds expectation system, or does not meet. So it's still graded, but the points are very nuanced. And as Mo knows, you might be scoring 0.63 on something. It's all adding towards an 80-point score, but it doesn't, it's not particularly clear sometimes.
Right. You said that if with the new standards, you could have a kind of closed governance model and not be very particular.
No, that's on the current standards. Yeah. Yeah. And that's an extreme example. Like, you generally won't find a B Corp doing that. It would be, you know, fairly difficult to not be doing great in an entire area, but you get the point. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So and this is another thing that I love about the B Corp movement, is that whilst their public communication is not always fantastic, they are really hot on maintaining the standards. And if they get any whiff of that kind of like going south, then yeah. So upholding the standards is like, it's all they have in terms of the reputation of the movement, right? So they have to do it.
In these categories, similar kinds of requirements as the current standard, so
Very similar. Yeah, so very similar requirements under the new standards. It's all still in draft form though, so we think we have a good idea, but yeah, generally we're pretty much along the same lines. There might be some evidencing differences. A key change is, get the laser out, fair labour contracts. This is not part of the current standards at all. It's spoken about in a disclosures section, which is kind of alongside your assessment, but it's not a requirement. That's because of the new labour laws coming in around 0-hour contracts. So that's a big change there.
So is that still, so for example, there's 5 boxes there, is that still actually a checklist you have to take against each of the votes? So if you take against wage reactions, for example, you would not need to meet it or exceed it.
Yeah.
You have to minimum meet it.
Yeah, not necessarily everything, but the majority of the things that are under this. Yeah, but again, until the standards have been finalized, it's kind of difficult to know exactly what that looks like. So you can imagine my job right now as a consultant is very fun for businesses who are looking like they might submit maybe towards the end of the year, and trying to kind of give recommendations as to what you do right now. But yeah, generally it's all moving towards the same place. It's just the evidencing nuances that might be a little bit tricky.
Sorry.
Hmm.
With our practically really as part of the real living wage campaign.
Yeah.
Living wages is different. Which one?
So this goes on national living wage. So yep, the government one. So I think that is, have I got it? Where have my notes gone? I thought I had a note on this. I think it's 12.80 outside of London, 13.85 in London.
It's going to become 12.60, the real living wage.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
By the end of April.
Yeah. So that's what we're judging against. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to focus on current framework, like what are current expectations. So we'll look primarily at D&I, which currently sits under the community section, and the workers section overall. So these are the 5 impact areas as they currently stand. Workers do kind of come up in all of them. So your people and your people strategy will be relevant across the board, but really the focus is in here, in the workers section, because we've got lots of fun things to go through. So these 4 things are key elements that I would say are really important to sustainable business practice across the board. So not just relevant to your people strategy, not just relevant to D&I. If we're talking about like really fundamentally shifting the way that you're doing business, these are 4 things that are really going to help you along the way. So formalizing your systems, especially for small businesses, I come across so many people who have great practices and great things that they're doing, but because they're not formalized into a policy or a process, they're not being reviewed or tracked, you can't get recognized for that because it's not embedded in the company culture and it's not accessible to everybody. If it's just living in your head as a CEO, if you decide to leave the company, then that practice leaves with you. So you need to get that written down into a system somewhere. So I know that like writing up a bunch of policies doesn't always sound like the funnest thing to do or necessarily the most impactful, but what you're doing is you're creating something that will stand the test of time, regardless of the people that are coming in and out of that. You're putting those things in place to live alongside your culture. Tracking metrics. If we're not tracking anything, we can't see what's going on. Therefore, we don't know what to change, where, how, or why. So metrics is really important, whether it's your pay equity, whether it's your D&I numbers of staff, or it's carbon measuring. You really need to be understanding the numbers. And as a data person, I'm sure you're very keen on using this information, right? Knowledge is power. That's why that is fundamental to making change across the business. Accountability. Hello.
Policies versus culture.
Yeah.
How do we test whether culture is actually reflected on policies? So, for example, you could have an unlimited holiday policy.
Yeah.
But yet in practice, people are not encouraged to take unlimited holiday because there's always a project that's on the go. On the same opportunities giving
people a learning budget, but then again using the same, or we don't have capacity right now, so can we look at this in Q3? Where do those sort of nuances sit?
Really good question. That's where the tracking the metrics comes in as a really important tool. Having the policy set and in place means that you have a long-term vision to work towards and a structure to work towards. If that policy isn't being adhered to or the leave isn't being used, you're not going to know that unless you're tracking the metrics for it. So putting a policy in place needs to be alongside a process. So when I'm talking about formalizing systems, I'm talking about writing up the policy, but embedding the process alongside. And that includes tracking metrics, but then it also includes your accountability. It includes your continuous improvement. So putting timeframes in around when you're going to be checking in on this stuff is really important. So for me, like let's take the unlimited holiday, for example. You implement it, you track how many days are being used across the space of a year. You get to the end of that year and you say, oh, okay, only 20% of our workers used their statutory or higher. That's not good. That's not legal. How do we change this? When you have those numbers in place, then you can take that to the leadership team. You can take it to the internal operations team, maybe marketing as well, and say, okay, there's a communication issue here, or there's a issue around people feeling shameful about taking that. We really need to do some training. We need to do some sessions. We need to train our managers to make sure that people feel comfortable to come and ask. But yeah, without the numbers, you haven't really got anything to go on, have you? And unless you've got someone who is looking after that policy and saying, okay, I'm the person who's checking in on it in a year, then it goes into the backwaters and you never see it again. So yeah, metrics and the accountability sits alongside it.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Oh, hello, I'm not loud enough. Can I ask? Oh, okay. Can I ask a follow-up on that? As a small business there's only two of us,
yeah,
and I know you're a solo business as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do you facilitate these sort of things when there's one of you doing everything anyway? What's a simple way of being able to adhere to these things when you either don't have an employee, or you have one or maybe two employees?
Yeah, very good question. So a side note, that as a solo business owner, I don't fill out the workers section at all. I don't have any workers, it's just me. So the impact assessment is just 4 areas for me. So I'm lucky. If there's just 2 or 3 of you, you want to make it as simple as possible. You don't want to overdo it. There's so much advice online on, CRM systems or, complicated ways of tracking things and maintaining things. I think when I was working with Mo on Watch This Space, I said, first you need to make it work for you. Like, what systems do you already have in place? Is there anything that you can build on? Spreadsheets and calendars, like, that's where I live. I put a reminder in my calendar to check in on that policy that I wrote for myself and my business operations in a year's time, to check in on it. And my supplier tracking is literally a spreadsheet with 10 suppliers on it. So don't overcomplicate and build on what you have, I would say. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Great. Yeah, so having a person who's fully accountable, that's written down somewhere, people can come along and be like, Steve, you're not doing your job. Come on, check it out. So that you can continuously improve. So your B-Corp assessment, you have to resubmit for certification every 3 years. Found out the other day that it was originally 2 years, and the whole community said that's actually not long enough for us to make the improvements in the background. It's not enough time. We need 3, and they listened and made that adjustment. Yeah. Sam at TEDx framed it as imperfect progress. We're not looking for perfect progress or perfect improvement. The world doesn't operate like that. We're looking for little, what's the next small step that you can take, not overhauling your entire business in a couple of weeks. Yeah, we're looking at 2030 targets here, 2050. What's the world going to look like 2100? Very quick note here. If you have a business of over 10 people, understand your worker numbers. How many part-time? How many full-time? In the B impact assessment, you'll be asked for what your full-time equivalent is. That's just a quick data point to be aware of. Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
So would I be assessed on staff that I provide for others, or would it just be my staff? Because obviously
just your staff.
So it wouldn't be temporary workers that I have out working for someone else, wouldn't be contractors, yada yada. It's just my own people.
Unless you're paying them.
Which I do indirectly. I do directly, and then the company pays them. Does that make sense? So if you've got a temporary worker, I would pay them, or actually I don't pay them, my payroll company pays them, and then I invoice the company for it.
That's an interesting one that I haven't come across before.
Yeah.
Challenging me. I'd probably need to look at your business structure fully to be able to understand that. My gut would say is, if you're paying anyone, even if it's your payroll company, then yes, they would probably be defined as your workers, as contractors.
Or maybe they would be a supplier because they supply
the pay for that? Because we're invoicing each other, we're not actually directly paying them.
Potentially.
So
Yeah.
it would be either or, but we'd have to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Sorry.
Sorry for
More
not
questions.
a full answer
Every
there,
time you
but
answer one, I'm like, I've got another one.
it's good.
Could be here for some time.
No, this is good because like this is content heavy, so questions in the room are fabulous. I've highlighted going forward, I've highlighted the ones in blue as the ones that I think are probably the most important out of that section. They're all important, that's why they're in the B-Corp assessment. But if you're going to start somewhere, this is where I would start. So D&I sits under the community section, but as we've seen in the new standards, JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, is pulled out as its own section completely, which I think is completely right. These are the three key areas under D&I that B-Corp wants you to focus on. So I would say as a good starting point is measuring and understanding the makeup of who works for your business. Until you kind of do, this should be an anonymized survey, by the way, for people to be able to self-identify. Until you understand the makeup of your business, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what your blind spots are, what you might be missing, and how diverse voices would be able to help your business elevate. So I would always start with measuring anonymously. How did you find that as a small business, Mo?
I'm gonna have to try and remember now what we did.
Yeah.
We did do a bit of, because we've got, so there's two of us as co-founders and one employee, everyone else is freelance. So we did a bit of asking questions on a survey thing, online survey, but mostly we just sat down and kind of talked about what we were going to evidence. That's how we did it mostly, because when there's such a small company, it's difficult to do anything like an anonymous survey or anything like that.
And I think because of the nature of your business, that's a comfortable conversation to have, right?
It was like there's things we could evidence: how many women, how many people of color, age demographics. We actually ticked loads of the different categories just between the three of us. So we just did a bit of that, but then we also just it made us set out goals for what we want to do in future. And as we grow, I think that's probably the biggest thing that came from going through the whole process, is it set out what we want to do in the future.
Thank you. Big section here is under hiring practices. And I know we were saying, as you're a recruitment company, you've got businesses coming to you asking you to anonymize all of the kind of applications that come in, and a variety of other requests that kind of sit under this section. I would always say you need to model it for the size of your business, and you need to prioritize as well. This is a question that is constantly evolving, and I do wonder what the new standards is going to say on this. I think having anonymized CVs coming into the hiring manager is a really great place to start. We all have unconscious biases. No matter how hard we try and work on them consciously, they exist, they're there. By anonymizing everything, that is just a fantastic starting point. So in terms of kind of what we were talking about non-negotiables, I would probably put that as a non-negotiable, because that's a really good baseline to be working from. Another kind of piece in that is ensuring that when your job ads are going out, that there's an analysis done on the language that's being used. So making sure that there's no kind of gendered language in there, that the language is welcoming and open. There's some sort of diversity statement at the bottom saying that you are open and welcome to all people of all ethnicities, cultures, backgrounds, that you will make reasonable adjustments for people. I mean, what's it like in the recruitment landscape at the moment? Because I kind of take D&I statements as a given nowadays, but I don't know if I'm clearly in a bubble, you know.
It is a tricky one because we do treat everyone equally, but I always think I'm going to be slightly controversial and say it's all well and good to take that information out. And I've actually had clients who blind interviewed people on video,
Yeah.
but the candidate didn't get a good experience.
Okay.
And quite often this is spoken about from a company's perspective and not necessarily from a person's perspective and their experience of a process. So I think it's great if it's done properly.
Yeah.
But if it's not done properly, sometimes the nuances of someone's detail, and I agree, you know, everyone's making decisions based on 2 pieces of paper, which is totally ridiculous. And I've been saying this for years, it's totally ridiculous. So there has to be some way of working past that. But I do think that sometimes it's, you know, like one of the jobs we've got on at the moment, it's like a 25k junior level, entry level role. Their CV is going to look pretty sparse with nothing on it to make any kind of decision. So why not just get rid of the CVs altogether and just invite people to an assessment centre or an interview?
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Where everyone has an equal chance depending on the day.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it makes it a bit pointless, because it's like you send a piece of paper and it's just got, I went to this university. And, you know, even with university type, you know, you've got to say what you studied or where you studied it or whatever. You can't not say some of those things.
Yeah.
So that's still going to form unconscious bias.
Yeah.
So
very true.
really,
yeah. Thinking about like where the level is.
And I would say that's not changed I've been in recruitment for 25 years and it's not changed in the 25 years that I've been in recruitment from the point of view of fear around, I need 2 pieces of paper to make a decision on who I interview. Even with a 25 plus year experienced recruiter in the mix, people still don't always trust that I know what I'm doing. And I have spoken to these people and I am selecting people that are right for the role, not based on gender and age, etc., but based on skills, because that's the whole point. But yeah, so
that must be incredibly frustrating.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
I think it's how do you do that and keep the other party in mind whilst doing it?
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I may be speaking out of turn here, but I feel like Watch This Space might have some good training around stuff like that. Thank you. Yeah, such a good point. Making it a good process for the candidate as well as the business is, fundamental. Right, I'm going to move us on from D&I unless there's any other questions in this area.
Just quickly ask you, there's talk about staff, etc. We rely on freelancers. Do freelancers count as staff in that context?
No, they would be considered suppliers. So they'd be considered in your supply chain. Yeah. Okay, financial security. This is where I've got my living wage note, £12.60, going up this month, £13.85 for London. If you don't know about it already, there is a Brighton living wage campaign, livingwagebrighton.co.uk. Please do join it. It's very good. So this section is one that's very close to my heart. So remember I mentioned that when I was in New Zealand, I joined a B-Corp, and they're the ones who supported me and I took them through their recertification. They were a financial investing platform. They're a B-Corp because they were enhancing financial literacy and making investment accessible from 1 cent. So they were opening up investment and all of these kind of hidden away, shady financial markets, opening it up to kids, women, young people, people from diverse backgrounds, Maori, and really taking the fear out of what that means. If we're going to move to a new capitalist model, because I don't advocate for the destruction of the entire system and burning it all down, if we're going to change the system, with that comes the need for financial literacy. So this section is very close to my heart. Along with living wage and pensions, I really believe that these 2 areas, if you start educating yourself on what these 2 things are, then your financial literacy kind of comes along with that. So living wage, standard, must. I think under the new standards, that's going to be mandatory baseline. providing your workers with access to a pension means that not only they have financial security now, but they will have financial security into their old age and can retire well. Quick question. How much carbon impact do you think your pension has? Do you think it's more or less than flying? Hands up for more. Hands up for less. More or less than eating meat. Hands up for more. Hands up for less. So your pension has a bigger carbon impact than both flying and eating meat. More than half of the money in the world that's invested is in pensions. So if you take anything away from today, go and make sure that any pensions that you have are invested in a socially responsible fund, because you could be paying for oil extraction right now. You could be paying for mining right now. So key takeaway, check your pension. Goes for banking as well. Yeah, check which bank you're with. Yeah, the big three, right? Banks, insurers, pension funds. Yeah, they control most of the wealth in the world. So if you're setting this up for your workplace, just making sure that the pension provider that you go with has a socially conscious investing option. I've noted down a couple here. So PropellerNet uses Smart Pension. Then there's Pension B, Nest, Penfold, and surprisingly, Aviva, which I wouldn't have guessed. Oh. Is there anybody else know any off the top of their head that they want to share? Yeah, that was a very quick Google search from me, apart from PropellerNet's one. So
Nest often come up. We use Nest. They often come up in the searches around it.
Fantastic. We've got a couple of things there around stock ownership programs, bonuses, and profit sharing. I think we haven't got a huge amount of time left. I'm going to skip over those as gold standard, very nice to have. If you're interested, come speak to me after. So health, wellness, and safety. This to me is the fun section of workers, because healthcare, aren't we so lucky to have the NHS? You get points in the B impact assessment for having the NHS. So if there's any other reason to save it, I mean, there's a key one right there. So focusing on wellness initiatives, this is really thinking about how are you connecting your employees together? How are you looking after them, asking them to look after themselves, asking them to look after each other, so that they can bring their best selves to work? Because when we bring our best whole selves to work, that's when people actually care about the work that they're doing, surprisingly. So if you can set up a running club, if you can subsidize people going to yoga, or set up a voluntary book club, these things are important. They're kind of, I think people put them in the soft skills kind of category of, oh, that's kind of a nice thing to have. But actually, for workplace culture, it's so fundamental to just giving people a sense of belonging. Watched a really good Netflix documentary recently called Join or Die, which I've been banging on about for weeks. It's all about the importance of social capital. And basically, by joining a group or starting a group, you are a rebel. You are being, you are advocating for democracy and knitting your community together. So high recommendation on that. Great for team bonding. Yeah, so good. Are there any questions in this kind of section?
What's an employee assistance?
It's counselling services. So if you offer any kind of healthcare coverage to your staff, generally that package can include an EAP, an employment assistance program, which gives them access to private counselling services. As we know, the NHS waiting lists for access to counselling wait times is really through the roof, not through any fault of the counsellors giving it. But this is one kind of workaround. With all of this insurance stuff, I do feel a bit dodgy because it is contributing to the collapse of the NHS because the private system, but it's a band-aid for now. And I think that's kind of where we're getting to. Also, B-Corp is an American system, so they highly value insurance. That's why I haven't done it as the highlight. It's the wellness initiatives that's the highlight.
Just on the global piece, is there a UK version then of B Corp presumably, and then a US version and a?
So when you start your impact assessment, it will ask you your geography, so what country you're in. It'll ask you how many employees you have, and it'll ask you what industry you're in, and that will tailor the impact assessment to your region, to your size and your industry. So it adjusts the questions, what questions you're seeing and what questions you're not. But it doesn't tailor it fully. So that's why we get recognised for NHS healthcare, right? Like if it was fully tailored, we'd probably not get recognised for that. But you'll see that a lot of the language is still very Americanized. So again, I do wonder like what the new standards will bring in that. But they've done a pretty good job at tailoring to where we are. What our assessment looks like is completely different to what you'd see in Japan, for example. I found out that a normal working week for a Japanese employee is like 60 hours. That's normal, like that's legal for them to do 60-hour working weeks. So things like that. Yeah, cool. This to me is the most obvious section for workers, career development. If you're allowing people to develop their training and skills and expertise, you are building business resilience because you're building up the knowledge base of your staff. So across training and reviews, the key thing for these, I would say, is making sure that happens regularly. So B Corp expect you to have an employee review process at least annually. So checking in with your staff at least once a year, not just to evaluate their performance on how they've been, but to speak to them about what their goals and aspirations are in terms of the company and in terms of their career, so that you can work backwards from there and build a pathway for them in terms of training and development. I think a lot of businesses just focus on how have you done this year? Good, bad, yeah, all right. But yeah, actually having that longer term picture is really important. And then having a regular training program. It's not really enough for B Corp or sustainable business in general to have ad hoc training here and there. We want to see that happening quarterly, every 6 months, focused on core skills for your people. Anything that's like considered cross skills, so kind of communication, upskilling, management, training, that kind of cross skills, and life skills, soft life skills, very, very important. Internships are great, but if you're a small business, it's a lot to take on. So that's why this one's not highlighted. Anything around training and reviews? Okay, I think this is the last piece. Engagement and satisfaction. Are you asking your employees if they are engaged and happy at work? Or are you just assuming because you ask Susan how she is in the kitchen, she's like, yeah, great. She's not going to tell you, the boss, the CEO who's in power, how she actually is. Like, anonymize, survey, at PropellerNet, we have it every week. We get a survey through asking various different questions. The amount of data that poor Jo, our head of people, has is like astronomical, but it means that she can tailor. She can really, really tailor what she's delivering in terms of training, social programs, etc. Sorry.
Is this a section that you didn't have to do yourself as a solo person?
Yeah, I didn't have to do any of the
this,
workers
right.
section. Yeah. Am I engaged and happy in my work? I really should check that. Yeah. So yeah, the survey and benchmarking part is key. That can literally be a 1-question survey that you send out once or twice a year. that says, how happy are you at work? Or you can go into a bit more detail. Generally between kind of 3 and 5 questions is a good place. Yeah.
It was interesting you mentioned around surveys, etc., being anonymized. One of the things that we really try and support, particularly leadership teams around, but more just from an organizational culture perspective, is around driving a feedback culture. And probably one of the biggest questions we're asked is, how do we encourage a feedback culture? And having anonymized feedback, I'm always on the fence, and I never have I sit this side or this side, but it doesn't support having a really open, candid, transparent feedback culture. How do, I suppose, the organizations you work with find or tread that quite delicate balance?
Yeah, a really good question. It definitely depends on the size of the business and the culture that they already have, for sure. Yeah, some companies have done the anonymized surveying, and that has then led to a more open communication culture, because as soon as they started reading out the comments on the all company calls once a week and discussing them openly around how they would respond to it, how they felt about it, that then meant that people could see their reactions to it. I think what we don't know, we fear. And if there's any kind of uncertainty, our brains psychologically go to the bad. It's just automatic in our brains. So if there's currently no culture of open sharing, I think the anonymized surveying is a good place to start, as long as that is then being shared openly from the leadership team. It needs to come top down from that perspective. That can then lead to, actually on the call, let's speak openly about what is good and what is bad. At the company in New Zealand, we trialed, and we had end of week calls on a Friday with beers. Lovely. Classic New Zealand. But we started a section called Fuck Up Friday, in which we openly shared something that we'd fucked up that week, because we weren't afraid of ramifications of that. It was owning the fact that we're human, we make mistakes, that's absolutely fine, we learn and we move on. But I wouldn't have done that at the London consultancy that I came back and worked for. They tried open, honest feedback, but actually the leadership team were not ready to hear it. So yeah, there's definitely some background work that needs to go there, and probably some communication training that needs to happen as part of that.
I think also it's a cultural thing, because I do think in this country people in this country are less open to being honest at work, and that's a very, very, very long culture of many years of not being able to. I know there's a company that I work with and we're using Thrive Sparrow at the moment. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but it's another tech tool that you can use in order to do surveys, and we're just looking at it at the moment to see whether it's what we can do with it, really, because a handful of people are responding, but the same handful.
Yeah.
So we're is it okay to incentivize them to say, everyone gets put in a hat and wins whatever at the end of the month,
that sounds lovely.
Start encouraging people to do it, so that we're collecting the data, really.
Yeah.
So, but it is what you just said. No.
Yeah, I was going to do the employee survey, but I think it's. I mean, I think it's starting from the end and showing quick wins as soon as you get the feedback and acting on it. Because until you deliver, if you ask the question, don't go away and bury your head and not answer the question. So I think it's about how you then respond to whatever the survey is, whether it's a small team meeting or a bigger company. The only thing I'd say about incentivizing with employee is the moment you start to incentivize, people are thinking about it with a different hat. They're going, oh, I want to win the bottle of champagne this week, rather than actually, what am I here to share? So it's kind of, we were talking about this earlier, but 6 months down the line, what do you want to have changed within your organization, and why are you asking the question therefore? And I think incentivizing, it's like saying, you know, doing an NPS score, would you recommend this place of work to a peer or friend? If you're offering a reward at the end of that, then you've kind of gone, oh, this is a great place to work because I might get a reward if I say that, you know, it's sort of, you're potentially skewing the data too positively, and then you're missing the point of the open and honest conversation. Really.
Such a good point. See, my brain immediately went to, oh, lovely, a treat. But of course, like, as you say, digging down into the why is so much more important. Yeah, awesome.
Am I allowed to ask a naughty question? Because I'm actually going to jump back, but I thought it was really interesting where there was the piece around bonuses, and I like a bonus. I am not poo-pooing
Of course.
a bonus ever. But we also know that having a bonus doesn't drive performance. And actually the research is suggestive that getting bonuses actually lowers long-term performance.
Interesting.
So I was really interested to understand from a B-Corp perspective, what is it about having bonuses in there that is so important? Because it kind of does contradict what the research is suggestive of. But again, I caveat that with, I'm yet to meet anyone who doesn't like a bonus. But from an organizational perspective,
I suppose
really
there's a difference
helps.
in B Corp's mind. There's a difference between kind of end of year bonuses if the business has done well throughout the year versus performance bonuses in which you are given extra money depending on how you as an individual has performed that year. It takes this broader look of essentially profit sharing. So we kind of interchange bonuses and profit sharing to take that kind of maximal view. And also commission is not considered in that at all. Yeah, so it's on if the business has done well. That's where they draw the line. But in the new standards, all of the kind of workplace culture piece, they are giving a lot more flexibility around, so that businesses can decide what's right for their culture, and it's more about the embedding of the processes and the practices.
I was going to say what you were saying about the fuck up Friday thing. Like, I think if more like British companies did that, that would also make a lot healthier and more transparent company culture, rather than blaming people for their mistakes when everyone, as you say, is human and it's natural to make mistakes. Even if you've got like 15, 20 years experience, you're still going to make mistakes. Like, and I think that also the more B Corps that follow that also will develop a healthier working culture for English people, and then obviously will make more profits as a result, because statistically happier working cultures make more profit. Like, that is the statistic.
Yeah.
And I think if more companies actually lead into that, it would be better for everyone involved. Like,
yeah,
it
definitely.
just makes sense. Like,
I mean, that's how that's how we felt there. It bonded us together. We saw our leaders claiming their fuck ups alongside juniors who'd just come in, but we were in a very safe working environment. And as a note that I will add to this is also, we really need to recognize that depending on who you are, your background, how you look, will depend on how comfortable you are on sharing any sort of feedback in a company. There are so many different power dynamics at play. And that's why I think starting with the anonymized survey, even if it's just like a Google form that is open to everybody, in which people can put stuff in, there's at least an element of, you don't need to go to your direct line manager or the CEO of the company to complain about something. There's another avenue there. That's what B Corp is trying to get out of, sharing the power and breaking down those dynamics a little bit more to then start embedding better practices from that point on. We are like 4 or 5 minutes over time, so I'm just going to wrap up very quickly and say, across all of those things, these are the key bits and pieces that I would say take a look at, yeah, maybe you're doing all of these things already. If in that case, fantastic, you're well on your way. Maybe you're doing some stuff, but it's not formalized. Maybe there's stuff in the business, but no one's accountable for it. And absolute top one, ethical pension provider would be my key. So I'm going to wrap this up by saying one of my businesses, Sussex Impact Pathway, we've got a new group course kicking off on May 21st, I think it is. So if you are interested in B-Corp assessment, but you're not really sure where to start, we're taking a group through. Small workshops. We meet in person once a month. Course lasts 6 months, and we go through each of the impact areas. Good amount of working time in the sessions, and then support in between the sessions, where you can email us, call us if you have specific questions. £1,200 for overall B Corp guidance compared to my fees, my individual one-on-one fees, and any sort of consulting company is very cheap. We've done this because we want it to be accessible, and we're opening up at least one spot on each group to a business run by a marginalised business owner for half that price, because we want to uplift and bring people from all backgrounds alongside us. And one of my focuses as Be Local co-chair is recognising that we have an extremely white middle class B Corp community across the country, but particularly in Brighton. And I really want to be trying to break down those barriers wherever possible. If you have any other questions at all, you can chat to me now, or you can email me. My face is way too big up there, apologies. Are there any wrap-up questions? Hi.
Hi. I didn't get a chance to meet you before, but I'm Kavya.
Hi.
And I'm doing masters at Sussex. So I'm just here to learn, know more about B Corps. So I didn't really get a clear understanding of the sustainability aspect in this. Like there's a lot of social and policy related things that I kind of grasped. But other than the pension thing, like I didn't really understand like how are you defining sustainability in this, and like how is it different from any other sustainable business?
Amazing question. Yes. So to clarify, any training, reading, learning I've done around sustainability is that we are taking a comprehensive approach to it. When we're looking at sustainable business, we need all three of the ESG pillars to hold that up. Longevity of a business doesn't come without the social impact elements. It doesn't come without the environmental, and it doesn't come without transparent governance. All three intersect all over the place. So when we're looking at the B Corp assessment, there's 5 impact areas, but as I said, workers actually have elements across all of those. So when I talk about sustainable business, I'm looking at it from this kind of, I think intersectional is quite often overused, but in this case, I think is fairly true in that environmental, social governance practices all interact over the top of one another. Today, we were focusing on people because this is the People and Culture Club. So very much the social pillar that sits under the sustainable business strategy. In my mind, society has taken the word sustainable to only mean environmental. And within the industry, that's not how we understand it. Environmental sustainability is its own pillar. Sustainable business is the thing that sits across all three. And I've been speaking to a few people in the community recently who are trying to move away from sustainable business as a term and moving more into business for good. The word sustainable is obviously having a lot of backlash at the moment, as well as anything to do with D&I. So for those reasons, and also for kind of accessibility of like language and concepts, business for good is maybe where the community is more heading and then it also avoids some of that confusion around environmental sustainability and social, right? So yeah, very interesting question. Thank you for raising it. Cool. Well, thank you all very much for your time. This has been fun.
Yeah.